PCGG can in fact be offered for sale in exchange for the land bonds.
Another question, Madam, is did not agree for a period of 2 years. Do you have a time frame for this?
What if they do not agree within
Yes,
2
for a
years?
period of 2 years, do you have a time frame for this?
Well, it will be the Department of Agrarian Reform that will try to resolve this. And the Department of Agrarian Reform will be able to resolve this, first of all, based on what the landowner has declared in his statement, and then on what is assumed to be the fair market value. At any rate, it will be the Agrarian Reform, Department of Agrarian Reform that will help in this matter.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. I am Janil Dimorito from Radio Bombo. You mentioned in the paragraph 5 of your proclamation that ever since the 1986 presidential campaign, you said that you would undertake an agrarian reform program. And may we know why it took you 17 months after you assumed office and dramatically 5 days before Congress convenes to issue this executive order?
Well, we wanted an agrarian reform program that would succeed. And if you notice, we have been criticized very much that we have not held sufficient consultations. So it was necessary to consult with as wide a sector as possible. Aside from that, we of course were busy in the matter of stabilizing this country. We had the plebiscite and then the congressional elections. And I think there were many things aside from just the agrarian reform that we had to attend to. But more important is that in the planning of the agrarian reform program, what was very necessary as far as I was concerned was a program that would succeed. Because turning out a program in a hurry and missing out on the necessary consultations would not have increased the chances of success. So I would much rather be blamed for having taken a long time in coming out with this agrarian reform than coming out with a hastily planned or hastily conceived program that did not have as great a chance of success.
My second question is something to do with page 6, section 16 of the executive order on production sharing, which says that which mandates 2.5% sharing of agricultural lands with gross sales in excess of 5 million. Is Hacienda Luisita, does Hacienda Luisita fall under this category?
Yes, it does.
Maybe could you share with us whether the gross sales annually of Hacienda Luisita exceeds 5 million pesos?
Yes, it does.
And would you push through for an immediate implementation of this?
Well, it's already mandated here.
Okay, thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. Lynn Newman from the San Francisco Examiner. 2 questions. First, do you intend to offer any legislative proposal on retention limits or priorities to the Congress? Or do you, from this point on, dissociate yourself from lobbying for or advocating any specific proposals to the Congress which would lead to the completion of the program?
Well, perhaps the members of the Cabinet Action Committee and those of who drafted the land bank proposal could offer the studies or the surveys and the consultations that they have conducted. They could offer whatever results that they have come up with to Congress for their own evaluation.
And the second question is, you said earlier in the press conference that you had asked your family about the voluntary transfer program for Hacienda Luisita. If I may, I'd like to ask what they said and whether or not the family has made a decision to join
They agreed,
the voluntary
although
program.
at some point I think I am going to be brotherless and sisterless at the rate I have been asking them to proceed with this. No, seriously though, I explained this to them. In fact, I had talked earlier to my children so that, in fact, whatever my children and I own could be first in this line. But my brothers and sisters assured me that whatever I decided to do, they would support me.
Magandang hapon, si President. This is Mr. Miyazaki from Japanese newspaper Akahata. Excuse me, could you explain concretely what is the difference of your land reform program and agrarian reform program and the land reform policy during the Marcos time?
Well, first of all, as I said, in the past, perhaps the reason why Marcos's land reform program failed was that the government did not extend the necessary support services to the farmers. Some farmers whom I had met with in the course of my visits to the province had said that they were given land, but they were not given the credit necessary to improve their farming, and they were not given the technical know-how. So this is the difference. With the Aquino government, we are pledged to give them all the necessary support services.
The next question is, why did you exclude the coconut and sugar land from the agrarian reform? Because, for example,
Excuse me, we did not.
why?
It is a comprehensive agrarian reform program. All are included.
But, for example, Governor Lacson in Negros Occidental proposed the 60 to landowners and 30 to diversification and 10 to landless farmers. What is your reaction or assessment about such proposal?
Well, that can be taken care of in the voluntary sharing.
Voluntary.
But I just want to correct your impression that we did not include sugar and coconut. We included all. And in fact, that it states right here, if you will read the first part.
Okay. Salamat po.
Mrs. President, James Delmar from Australian Associated Press. You say that there is a budget of 50 billion pesos over 10 years for the land reform program, and yet you have left the matter of how much the landowners are to be paid up to Congress to decide. How can you have reached a figure of 50 billion without knowing what Congress decides?
Well, the Cabinet Action Committee had studied the matter very carefully, and they had taken all things into consideration. So this is the figure arrived at.
But they must have based their estimate or their guesstimate on something, so presumably they have made up their minds what sugar lands, coconut lands, rice and corn lands should be paid, how much the owners should be paid.
Well, yes, they did have an idea on that. Otherwise, we could not have come up with the figure. But as I said, because the Constitution mandates that it should be Congress to identify and to state exactly what the retention limits are, we are leaving it to them to decide.
One other question. I wonder if you could tell us, just give us an idea of the time scale of the whole program. Will you allow, for instance, Congress to go on indefinitely debating the issue, or will you set a time limit?
No, as I said earlier, within 90 days, the Presidential Agrarian Reform Commission will be coming up with the implementation guidelines. And so Congress should, within the 90 days, come up with its own version. Otherwise, we will proceed with this until Congress says otherwise.
Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Malumanga, the Chronicle. I wanted to find out, ma'am, although it may be assumed that certain persons are considered beneficiaries of the program according to set criteria, the executive order does not spell out exactly who are the priority beneficiaries, unlike previous drafts which were more explicit. In one draft, for example, even children of landowners are considered priority beneficiaries. Who will decide on this?
Well, the members of the Presidential Agrarian Reform Commission will be identifying who are the beneficiaries. And first of all, in the statement of the landowners and other entities who own lands, the farmer beneficiaries will in effect be identified, because you will be identifying either the tenants or the farmers who work on that land.
And then we would like to find out, please, when you ran for the presidency, you mentioned the principles of social equity and productivity as the two main principles that would guide your agrarian reform program. And in the draft, we read such adjectives as realistic, flexible. Could you please tell us what were the list of principles that really guided you when you finalized this executive order, and probably according to the hierarchy of values that you placed for them?
Well, as I said earlier, I wanted a program that would succeed. And so in order to succeed, we would have to be very realistic about the conditions obtaining now.
Thank you.
We have time for last two sets of questions. Go ahead, please.
I'm Jim Goodnow, U.S. Radio. You said that if Congress doesn't act, then you will proceed on your own. I'm wondering if you could tell us how you will proceed on your own, and does the executive order leave you the ability to come up with retention levels and whatnot?
On that section. Incorporating the physical targets, implementation schedule, and support requirements of agrarian reform, and shall submit the same to the PARC for approval. Such program of implementation shall take into account and be consistent with priorities and retention limits that Congress may in the meantime prescribe, and the following basic policies and guidelines set forth in the Constitution. This morning, as I said, I presented copies of this to Senate President Jovito Salonga and Speaker Pro Tempore Antonio Cuenco. So I am sure they realize that within 90 days we will be coming up with the implementation schedule and the requirements. So I am very sure that they will take this matter very seriously and will also come up with whatever is necessary with regard to priorities and retention limits.
So that means then that you, at this point, are not, if Congress doesn't act, you're not ready to say what you can do if Congress doesn't act, if it gets bogged down in parliamentary debate and whatnot?
Well, I really feel sorry for Congress, the way some of you ask these things about Congress. I have the highest respect for the members of Congress, and that I think we should not immediately judge them on something that they have not yet done. I think they are just as dedicated as most of us are here. In fact, maybe more so than some of us here. So I am just very confident that there are enough people in Congress who will see to it that whatever we have stated here in the executive order, they will try to help us in implementing instead of obstructing it.
Magandang hapon po. Rafi Molino po sa Radyo ng Bayan. Ma'am, noon pong panahon ng Ginoong Marcos, nagkaproblema po ang mga may-ari ng mga lupain at ang tinataguriang fair market value na sila rin po ang nagbibigay. Ang problema po nitong mga landowners ay may mga balit hindi nagkasundo kung paano talagang babayaran ng katamtaman ng kanilang mga lupain for the compensation. Mayroon po ba tayong kaparaanan ngayon upang makuha talaga ang kung magkano talaga ang dapat na maibayad sa mga
ng kanilang lupa. Tapos kailangan din nilang bayaran ang tax corresponding to this declared market value. So, siguro naman, hindi nila tataasan masyado yan dahil kailangan din naman magbayad sila ng katumbas na buwis. Kanya sa palagay ko, ilalagay nila yung fair market value. Pagkatapos, ang agrarian reform naman, titignan din kung ano ang halaga ng mga lupain batay sa mga presyo ng lupa na naipagbili nung nakaraan na panahon.
Maraming salamat.
Can you extend it for 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Rosario Liquidation from Reuters. On page 8 of the executive order, letter A, it says the CARP is founded on the right of farmers and regular farm workers or landless to own directly or collectively the lands they till, or in the case of other farm workers to receive a just share of the fruits thereof. Does this mean that if the landowners opt on a production sharing scheme or a profit sharing scheme on a voluntary basis, that their lands will not have to be split up?
Excuse me, is it based?
Does it mean then that if the landowners opt for a production sharing or a profit sharing scheme on a voluntary basis, that their lands will not have to be split up?
No, it has to be by agreement. No, and that you mean to tell me in case the landowner is willing to share of the fruits, that his land will no longer be subjected to agrarian reform? This is not an either or. Uh, he has to give in the production sharing. When I met with the landowners, they expressed to me that perhaps they could be given time in order to perhaps work out a phasing out or another scheme whereby they could still continue to operate their land. So I said, in the meantime, what is it that you can do so that you can improve the incomes of the farmers? And one of the things that they had told me was that they would be willing to either increase the wages of the farmers or to share in the profit. And that is why in one of the sections here, SWID included the production sharing.
But still, they'll be covered by the
Yes,
reform.
either collectively or directly. It is not an either or. I mean, it's not a separate option.
In fact, this constitution provide incentives for voluntary land sharing. The state shall further
In the Constitution, can I just read you? The state shall further provide incentives for voluntary land sharing.
Yes, we have very limited time. One question each because Gabby wants to ask a question.
Richard Goulet, Financial Times. Would you say that the getting this approved, the retention limits approved within 90 days is the first test of your ability to get your programs approved by Congress?
I don't really know if that is the first test, but I will in fact be including this in my State of the Nation address to me to impress upon them the importance that I am placing on this agrarian reform program.
Last question.
Gabby Tabunyar, CBS News, Mr. President. On the matter of sanctions, with people in Negros threatening to arm themselves or actually organizing some armed groups to fight the agrarian reform program. The sanctions say people who willfully prevent shall be liable for contempt. What does this mean? This seems on paper, without specifics, a very weak response to what people are thinking of doing. Can you call out the troops, for example, to...
On that matter, why don't I ask Undersecretary Macaraig to explain exactly what contempt is?
You will note that the executive order provides that all disputes referring to the implementation of this executive order shall be under the jurisdiction of the DAR, or the Department of Agrarian Reform. If any party, either the beneficiary or the landowner, should, if the parties should disagree, then they can bring the matter before the DAR.
I know that.
And if one party should allege, let's say the farm worker should allege that the landowner is trying to frustrate his efforts, then he could have the guilty party cited for contempt, and the DAR can declare that party in contempt and impose whatever sanctions the DAR should feel is necessary in that case.
How do you meet an armed threat, for example, against the program? Can you call in the military? That's all I wanted to know.
Armed threat. The DAR can decide what measures are necessary. No? So if the threat is real, then the DAR can probably can ask the armed forces to enforce its orders.
All right.
If there is any defiance of any order that should be issued by the Department of Agrarian Reform.
Thank you. One last question. Mrs. President, it is apparent that this land reform program cost you and your government managers a lot of hard work and worry. May I ask now, please, which worried you most during your nearly 1.5 years of your administration? The threats to topple your government, rumors of coup d'etats, or the land reform program?
Well, Well, I guess each problem has its time. I guess in November I was worried about attempts to unseat me, but there is really no, I cannot possibly compare the problem of agrarian reform with that which follows from people who want to unseat me. These are two very different things. My heart and soul is committed to making this agrarian reform program succeed. In the other matter, I think at this point I will just ignore them. They have tried their best. And I think it should be clear to them by now that the people no longer want any of the forces of Marcos to come back.
Thank you very much.
Well, I wish to thank all of you for coming here for this press briefing. I realize that I have not been very good insofar as giving press conferences is concerned. Perhaps now that Congress is there, I will have more time to attend you. I know I've been hearing a lot of complaints, but I think that the press secretary does very well in my stead. So if I am not available, I am sure that Teddy Benigno can be relied upon to let you know exactly what it is that I would like to bring across to you. So thank you and good afternoon.